Okay, recording.
Thanks, Tao, and thank you everybody for joining session 8, our final session of the book club. You're going to get your Monday afternoons back. As a reminder, we record these sessions, so if you don't want to be seen, stay on mute, keep your video off. I'd love for this to be as conversational as possible, so please chime in along the way. If you're having technical difficulties, maybe we can resolve it via the chat, or Spencer and Tao, their emails are up there. And then from a compliance perspective, this is all about advice, but we aren't actually giving anything. I guess it's advice on how to give advice. And we're at our final and ultimate chapter here. Get my slides to go to chapter 12. I'm not sure that it's not part 1, part 2, part 3. It's an end-to-end example where we're trying to go through everything that we've covered, and then kind of based on the book and what Paul and I have done here, we come up with some calls for action. And of course, all of those are debatable too, and we can discuss those if you'd like. There's a little bit of context, but to begin, I think that Paul and I think of this as kind of a blueprint for a new type of offering that combines kind of ongoing financial planning with investment advice that could help wealth advisors, planners to scale their businesses perhaps, but deliver, I'd say, kind of real-time, evolving financial advice that evolves with the individual or household's circumstances. And again, we've put forth, I think, 3 kind of parts to the book and 3 parts to our model. Each part could probably be used on an a la carte basis or standalone basis, but I would argue that its kind of highest and best use is when it's combined into this new form of a combined integrated model where, as depicted kind of on the screen, you have your life cycle model kind of providing the highest level financial planning advice, how much to consume, how much to save, how much life insurance to purchase, how much of an annuity should be purchased eventually, developing that kind of complete holistic view of an individual's balance sheet, the output from that life cycle model, especially a view of somebody's liabilities and their human capital, feeding into our child model, what we refer to as a net worth optimization, which is coming up essentially with 2 or perhaps 3 target asset allocations, a target asset allocation that reflects asset location and thus targets for taxable accounts, tax deferred, and tax exempt accounts. And then that output feeds into our final model, our grandchild model, which is a form of a fund of funds alpha tracking error optimizer that is able to optimize across any number of accounts and account types, that provides kind of that ongoing asset management for people. And so moving on, again, starting again with the child model, and now we're going to assume somehow that Isabella, remember, she's our hypothetical investor. She's 25 years old. She's working with her planner, Paula. And presumably, we've assumed that ideally Paula has a state-of-the-art financial planning, investment management system that's been developed based on the blueprint laid out in the book. As you'll recall, I think it was back in chapter 2 when we were talking about kind of holistic investor profiling, and we introduced the idea of asking additional questions that go well beyond a traditional risk tolerance questionnaire to have a better understanding of the investor's preferences. And those preferences, summarized here on the model or on the screen, are for Isabella here at age 25, and they feed into those life cycle models that help us to tailor or personalize the output of the life cycle model for Isabella. And I'll go slow and pause if anyone wants to chime in with questions. Looking at Isabella's situation, she's age 25. As people recall, inherited some money from the sale of the home from her grandmother. So relative to many 25-year-olds, she's her balance sheet is looking, pretty good. And this is not the result right now of a model per se. This is just her actual balance sheet at time 0 or age 25 that Paula has inherited. And then Paula's desire is to provide ongoing financial planning and investment management advice to Isabella. And there's a wide variety, going back to the parameters on the previous slide, that Paula's software will be considering that helps her to tailor that advice. But one of the things that Paula uncovered about Isabella is that she comes from a family that has fantastic genes. They tend to live extremely, much longer than kind of the average person would. Paula has indicated that in her hypothetical software system that she's using, and using the Gompertz model. I think that was chapter 3. She comes up with, a custom schedule of probabilities for how likely it is at each age for Isabella to be alive. And any calculation kind of within the life cycle model that uses probabilities of being alive are going to be personalized based on what Paula learned about Isabella, that she's highly likely to be, to live longer than most. Again, I'll pause. Paul, I don't know if you want to add anything here, or I'll keeping on. And so early on, Paula likes to, try to, in broad brushstrokes, explain to her clients, including Isabella, what they're kind of signing up for, what the plan looks like. And immediately, Paula is able to put forth in real terms or inflation adjusted terms, kind of a picture for Isabella of what her discretionary and non-discretionary consumption is going to look like throughout her lifetime. Kind of continuing with the big picture, Paula can say, okay, well, here you are at age 25. Here's what your kind of regular financial wealth looks like. We hear that you want to leave a real bequest to your loved ones of $1 million. There's this initial period of your life, Isabella, where you're going to be purchasing each year term life insurance to make sure that you're able to give that $1 million away to your loved ones. At some point in time, your financial wealth will grow to a point where you no longer need to protect, let's say, the value of your human capital or lock it in order to provide that request. And as illustrated here, eventually Isabella would, retire, and she would be able to, she would protect herself against longevity risk by purchasing an annuity. And so big picture, here's kind of the plan for Isabella. And again, I'll kind of pause. Next, Paula likes to provide all of her clients, including Isabella, with kind of a depiction about how their net worth is likely to evolve over time. And here you see an optimistic, a median, and pessimistic case. Now, I think when Paula shows this to some clients, again, I would imagine that, what would happen is people, well, oh, I don't like this idea, or I find this perhaps unintuitive that my net worth would be going down, through time. And so what does Paula do? Well, she tries to break out at least the asset side of the balance sheet for her clients and show them Well, why is that really happening? Well, you have this giant human capital bond-like asset that is, quite large here at age 25. But as one moves across their lifetime, human capital will be decreasing in terms of value and relative value. And again, Isabella will be consuming and saving and kind of converting at least some portion of her human capital into saved financial capital. And then upon retirement, there will be some level of human capital kind of remaining.
In Illinois.
No, let him go, let it go.
Hey, Larry, welcome to the party. I don't know if you can hear me. I might even have to have you muted. And so at retirement, she'll be living off of what I think of sometimes as deferred human capital, deferred labor income in the form of some form like Social Security or social insurance. Perhaps, if she were at this moment, she's not scheduled to have a DB plan, but if somebody did, that would be another kind of form of deferred labor income. Then she'll be drawing down her, financial assets, part of which will be annuitized at some point in time. And then I'd say this is going to be one of our calls to action, but I think Paula likes to, show her clients, including Isabella, a picture of what their balance sheet looks like. And again, I think if there was a change that Paul and I could call upon the industry to make, and I'll probably return to this shortly, would be is that wouldn't it be wonderful if investors would have an idea of what their individual economic balance sheet looked like via the life cycle model that we've presented, I guess chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6. One is able to, create an estimate of what somebody's balance sheet will really look like, not only now, but in the future. And that should be front and center from our perspective within the financial planning world. And every time one meets with their advisor or logs on to their robo-advising system, whatever it happens to be, as opposed to simply focusing on the asset side of the balance sheet, or perhaps even more narrowly, just on the financial assets represented by the accounts in question, somebody would really be presented with a holistic balance sheet. And then on this slide, what Paula is doing is trying to demonstrate to Isabella, here is what, in the median kind of set of scenarios or the median case, here's what I think your balance sheet will actually look like at age 65. Again, this is in real terms. Maybe, it would be very easy for Paula to probably display this in nominal terms, and then it'd look, I'd say, much rosier, perhaps. But she's also able to say, here's what kind of the optimistic scenario looks like, and here's what the pessimistic scenario looks like. Again, pausing, notes over from right to left. Any questions, comments? Again, just in terms of big picture stuff, immediately Paula is able to present to Isabella, hey, here's what I think, or how we think the aggressiveness of your financial capital asset allocation will look like. And it starts off, nearly all in equity. And then as Isabella is moving through her life, expected to decrease, but there is, some level of randomness associated with this. And, at this point, we're kind of making the assumption that everything we've been looking at so far is coming from kind of part 1 of the book, the life cycle model. But that life cycle model is going to do essentially a handoff in which various outputs from that life cycle model now feed into the child model, which is going to produce that net worth optimization on behalf of Isabella. I get my slides.
Tom, maybe before you go on to that, go back to the glide path slide. So the way this slide was generated was we run the we run the parent model over time, and then at each here in the way this is built, that every 5 years in each of these median and pessimistic, optimistic cases, we actually run the child model. And so the equity allocations you're seeing here are the outputs of the child model.
And perhaps I should add, I think we're keying on this slide, everything off of net worth. There's different ways of organizing this. If we had keyed off of just equity level, you could have something where the lines are not kind of intersecting with one another, if that was
Right. But yes, but the thing is that we run the child, when we're running this simulation, we do run the child model over time and in different scenarios. We run the optimizer to generate this.
And so, speaking of running the child model, we're going to move to one instance of running this. So, on Isabella's behalf, Paula takes, runs the child model. And again, here, the red box, I guess, is just emphasizing here, look, lo and behold, here is, her two asset location targets. If you put the two asset location targets together, you can see that she's nearly 97% of her financial wealth is invested in equities. From a net worth perspective, over on the right, this is in line with Isabella's risk tolerance. And something that we weren't able to do, and I wish we could have done this, and this just gets very messy, because the child or the grandchild model is really designed to be can be run daily, in which it is, evaluating the individual investment options that are getting used, looking for, tax losses to possibly harvest, whether or not it's in the interest of Isabella, given various trading costs, to buy or sell anything, how to deploy new money. It just gets very messy. So even though I've built this, I guess, as an end-to-end example, it's really not quite an end-to-end example. It'd be really nice to show that. It just gets very detailed and very messy very quick. So through the magic of time, we want to just fast forward Isabella from age 25 to age 45, and to do that, we just assume that the median scenario has kind of come to pass. And again, Paula likes to make the balance sheet, as she should, as we would argue, front and center in the planning process. And again, via the magic of Monte Carlo simulation and randomness, is able to paint a picture not only of kind of the median balance sheet at age 65. So again, looking forward, Isabella is 45 now, but Paula can continue to say, hey, at retirement, expected retirement, age 65 or some other age, or any age actually, here is what I think the optimistic, the median, and the pessimistic view of your holistic balance sheet in real terms looks like. And again, just to repeat what I said earlier, is we would argue that the balance sheet should be front and center in the planning process. Going from parent model back to child model, again at age 45, how should Isabella be allocating? Again, by running that child model, Paul is able to come up with updated targets for Isabella's taxable and qualified money. And again, in theory, this would be handed back off to the grandchild model as a series of inputs. And again, I'm not going to illustrate that. Now, all of a sudden, again, as the kind of the chapter evolves and we're tracking Isabella through time, something that Isabella's now age 65, Paula, she's decided to retire. Again, we didn't make up how old she was, but Paula has moved over to become Peter. And so now Isabella is working with her new financial advisor who's continued to use the now tried and true, not just state of the art, but it was state of the art then, maybe state of the art now, planning investment system. Peter is using this on on Isabella's behalf. And now, as opposed to thinking about what does Isabella's, balance sheet look like at retirement, I think Isabella is now like, well, what's my balance sheet going to look like when I'm age 85? And again, Peter, who has been steeped and probably trained under Paula, he too likes to make the balance sheet front and center, and he would present Isabella with the median, optimistic, and pessimistic case. And by now, this, hopefully Isabella really likes seeing and derives comfort from the idea that, hey, here is kind of a broad representation of my overall financial health. And I've been, trained to think about my financial health in a balance sheet terms. And I can see that, frankly, my balance sheet is pretty healthy, and she derives probably some form of utility from that. And so to kind of close this out in terms of the end-to-end example, again, the values from the balance sheet, from that life cycle model, once again, flow through to the child model. Peter runs that optimization, comes up with updated targets for Isabella's taxable and tax advantage accounts, which then would feed into the grandchild model to say exactly what what I guess Peter should be buying and selling on behalf of Isabella. And I believe that concludes kind of our end-to-end example. And we're going to close out with some calls for action, some of which I've even touched on. But maybe I'll pause again and see if anyone has any questions about the end-to-end example. If I let enough awkward silence go by, someone will feel, necessary to chime in. So kind of, how do Paul and I think the industry should evolve, change, grow, get better? Number one here is, again, we think, the industry should be using a comprehensive, normative approach that's, steeped in the best theoretical kind of underpinnings possible to provide lifetime advice. I'd say as an industry, we're, all too often we have to kind of rely on simplistic heuristics just because they're easy to apply. And of course, to make these kind of advanced methodologies, available, again, I would argue, one really needs, software that makes it easy for that advisor, for that wealth planner to take rigorous theory and put it into practice. Maybe one comment here is, of course, investors don't always act rationally. And I think, some people say, well, should our models not be normative models? Should they be, based on the behavior of people? And I guess, with normative models, right, we're not trying to model the behavior of investors. We're really trying to say, here, you've got an expert, you've got Paula on your side, you've got Peter on your side, you've got this advanced, software system on your side, assuming somebody could build it. Here is what's truly best or optimal for you. And again, I think, people are willing to, trust in the system to some degree and receive better advice. Again, if anyone has questions related to these 8 calls for action, please chime in. I hear somebody.
Hi, yeah, Tom.
Hey, Sebastian.
Yeah, I have some sort of a comment and a question on this. So I understand that it should be a normative model, But how to reconcile this with the fact that some people can make irrational decisions along the way that might not be in line with this model. And so that might take them in a different path from what the model suggested. And yeah, so I don't know your thoughts on this and how to like better approach this fact.
Yeah, maybe Sebastian, I'll try first. Yes, if people were left to their own devices, they would certainly do all sorts of irrational things. But it seems that one of the values of going to a financial planner is having that financial planner help you modify your behavior in a more rational in a more rational way. So I think the idea of you know basing things on a normative model is it really makes the role of the financial planner quite central to helping investors avoid making irrational mistakes and instead doing things in a rational way.
Early on, I think we gave it was a bad example, but that we're quickly approaching the world of driverless cars, and one could create the algorithm for driving the car that perfectly mimicked the behavior of actual drivers, but the safety record of the driverless car would then mirror that of actual drivers, which would be, not so good. Again, if I were buying a driverless car, you would ideally want to pick the algorithm that was going to be optimal, and part of my way I derive utility is staying alive, I guess. And so I would want, that optimal driving car of the future that's making decisions to do so in an optimal way that keeps me safe. And again, I guess that, the role of the advisor, I think a lot of times advisors almost see themselves as being, part coach. And again, I think by having that relationship with the client, by presenting the balance sheet, by talking about market ups and downs and how we're going to react, again, one I think can help nudge their client to make better financial decisions. That's part of their role. So definitely appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Number two here is, just the importance of life cycle finance. And I might dovetail that with just the importance of financial planning in general. Again, but kind of, I would say my, observation is that as an industry, we are very focused on the investment piece of investment management. And again, I would argue that, kind of the life cycle finance, life cycle model, knowing how much to consume, how much to save, avoiding or hedging, if you will, mortality risk, longevity risk. All of these seem to me like first order decisions that we really need to get right. And it's not that the investment piece is important. It's just, in my mind, the life cycle piece, the financial planning piece is of paramount importance. And I don't think as an industry, we put enough emphasis on the planning part.
Yeah, so Tom, I'd like to add a little bit to that. If you recall, in our very first session, Don Phillips was here, and he raised the issue of of advisor compensation. And of course, we know from economics that people are going to behave according to what incentives you give them, and if the compensation of advisors is based upon selling funds to their clients, well, then that's what they're going to do. They're going to sell funds. And it seems what there needs to be, in order to put this point into practice, would part of that would have to be, having compensation schemes that, properly motivate advisors to help their clients with the life cycle problem and not just do fund picking.
Absolutely. Call to action number 3 is, again, moving beyond just kind of what I would call a myopic focus on risk tolerance and or the investor's risk profile in terms of how are they going to invest their financial capital, to really moving to a holistic investor profile that is contemplating a broader set of investor preferences. Again, to maybe take this even deeper, it's as if the world has not fully understood what Paul Samuelson was saying, and somehow we need to nudge the world towards trying to understand what Paul had to say. Moving to point 4, and again, I guess I kept in our end-to-end-ish example, kept hammering this point home, is that as an industry, I think it would be so wonderful if we could adopt the use of an individual, household, economic balance sheet that investors were used to seeing, they could see. Again, I believe it to be the best overall kind of summary of somebody's financial position. It's, again, good for corporations, good for businesses. Arguably, it would be good for individuals, and having that holistic view and making that front and center of an financial planning exercise, I think would move us all to a better spot. Early on, I think it was back in chapter 2, Paul and I talked about, that we had worked on an Excel spreadsheet that would help one to plug in a few numbers, perhaps related to salary, savings, and other information, and at least have a rough estimate of what that balance sheet would look like. I don't think I ever circled back on that, but we have that. Not quite sure how to distribute it, but if somebody's interested in that, just email me and I'll send that your way. Point number 5, again, just relates to kind of the fragmented nature of, I'd say, the toolkit that financial advisors, financial planners are often using, where they're buying a risk tolerance system from one vendor, other pieces of kind of the puzzle from others. And it's, again, as we highlighted a lot back in chapter 2, again, it's unclear that these pieces are exactly speaking the same language. I think that can be real kind of errors in the planning process when these pieces are not talking together. And so just on the need for coherent and consistent financial planning systems. Point 6, again, and I think what we're trying to say here is that, with our life cycle model, it is designed in such a way that as an individual's circumstance evolves, ideally, and if it's done correctly with software, that the output of that life cycle model should essentially be evolving, I would say, almost in real time with the changing circumstances of an individual. And I get the impression that in today's world, the way financial planning works is that it's such an endeavor to gather the inputs to perform a planning-oriented exercise that the real plan, it doesn't feel like a living, breathing plan. It feels like something that gets revisited every 5-ish years and kind of hidden away. But it's not particularly adaptive. And again, I think that technology has evolved considerably, automation has evolved, and the time has come to have kind of real-time financial planning. Point 7, and this gets back a little bit to kind of risk tolerance and common practice amongst advisors is they would administer a risk tolerance questionnaire. The person fills out that questionnaire, they get scored, and it says there whatever it happens to say, moderately aggressive. The advisor files that away in hopes of not, being, sued, and, will not depart from that. And again, I think that well-meaning, regulators have periodically constructed regulations that are almost preventing a financial planner from taking a true holistic view of their client, where they're almost forced to say, if this is the narrower myopic risk profile on the RTQ, no matter how much else I know about my client, I must invest this account this particular way. And again, my belief is that is not good for the investors. It's not inspired regulation. And to the degree that there are regulations that are essentially preventing a holistic view of a client or a household, again, I think Paul and I would argue that those regulations need to be revisited.
Yeah, I guess Tom, what I would add to that is, what was it, 1970, ERISA became the law of the land in the US in 1973, which changed for the DB world, where in the DB world prior to ERISA, there was a list of approved securities that that a plan sponsor could buy. And with ERISA, they threw that out the window and said, no, we're going to go with a holistic, based on Markowitz, we're going to go up with a holistic approach. So it's not about what securities you buy, it's about getting to the right risk expected return trade-off. So I think what we're saying here is we'd like to see that happen, just generally for advisors.
And then, the final thing here is, again, I think what we've done by joining life cycle models with, single period models, I think it's a big deal. Again, I think this work, started, to some degree with, Samuelson, and then, Merton picked it up. But I feel like, Samuelson and Merton haven't revisited kind of the joining of life cycle models and single period models, for 50-ish years here, or perhaps more. And it's never become, I'd say, actionable for practitioners to combine life cycle models with single period models. And I would say that this seems like a very fruitful and positive way to create better outcomes for investors. And I guess my hope would be is that this, I'm calling it the blueprint, but I'm hoping that this will inspire, other researchers to, pursue this path and build upon what Paul and I are trying to invigorate, and that others will follow. Anything to add there, Paul?
No, I think that sums it up.
All right. Well, I guess we're kind of done. I'm happy to take questions on anything that we've covered today or before, or on other topics. The slides. This I don't know how many 200 some odd slides we've gone through, and of course, anyone that wants the PowerPoint can use this. Of course, part of our hope is that people that are teaching PhD and master's level classes related to financial planning will essentially use this book as the textbook, and perhaps leverage these slides as part of the ongoing curriculum. Again, if you have questions now, feel free to chime in. If they come to you later, feel free to email us. Again, Paul, I'm so thankful for you to collaborate, having been able to collaborate on this book with you. I don't know if you have any kind of parting thoughts before we close out the call.
No, I don't have anything else unless someone would like to either ask a question or raise an issue or, discuss any of this in in any way.
This is Steve Horan, would just say how grateful I am for you guys to want to put together the monograph, but do these book club sessions. I think it's a great contribution to put all these different things together in a holistic framework that truly can be operationalized. That's not to say that there are vendors out there with black box software programs that will do all of this in one fell swoop, but you've clearly shown that it is possible. And I think that's great stuff.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, if there's nothing else, again, I guess I really want to thank, the CFA Institute Research Foundation for supporting this research, Morningstar for supporting the research as well. So grateful that Roger Ibbotson was, willing to write the foreword for the book. I think he did a fantastic job. Larry Siegel, I saw you at one point on the line. Maybe you're still here. Thank you so much for all the wonderful editing that you did, and for those
You're
of you
welcome.
who
I really enjoyed it.
all right, thanks, Larry. And thank you to all of you, I guess, for just reading the book, for joining the book club and asking your questions. I'm hoping that more questions will come along, and when they do, email us. And so to a good lifetime. Thank you very much. And that's it for now.
Okay, Tom,
Yep.
could you stay on? Can you stay on